Frisco's Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
We've seen dozens of COVID cases in the White House, and we know a lot of the names of the folks who've contracted the virus. People like Hope Hicks, senior aide in the White House, one of the president's closest confidants. Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, who was quite sick. Presidential lawyer and conspiracy theorist Rudy Giuliani. Of course, there was Donald Trump himself, who was quite famously hospitalized with the virus. All of those people receive top-notch medical care, including care that's not available generally to the public. Today, though, we learned more about another White House COVID patient, someone you probably haven't heard of, someone who isn't famous and who isn't coming out of this ordeal saying he feels 20 years younger, like the president did. His story is detailed by Jennifer Jacobs, senior national political reporter at Bloomberg, who has broken many of the stories of COVID in the White House, and she's here with us tonight. Jennifer, first of all, you've been doing incredible reporting on this beat, as strange as a beat as it may be. Can you tell us about the Mr. Creed, the head of White House security, and his battle with this illness?
Well, he's one of the White House officials that didn't come out of this with very few consequences. He actually had some very severe consequences. So he's the head of White House security, which is his role is the person that handles personnel security, clearance to come onto campus, onto White House campus, passes and things like that. He works very closely with the Secret Service on security matters around the campus. He works in a SCIF in a building near the White House, on the White House campus. And we reported in October that he'd been hospitalized in September with the coronavirus. And that's pretty much all we knew about him until recently. We were alerted to a GoFundMe page that a family friend of his had created to raise money for him. And we verified that this GoFundMe page was indeed legitimate and valid. And the family friend outlined in the public documents on the GoFundMe page some of the consequences of what had happened to him during his 3 months in the hospital. And one of the consequences was he had some complications from the coronavirus, and he needed an amputation. He lost his big toe on his left foot, and on his right, he lost his right foot as well as the lower part of his leg. So he had some very severe consequences, is in a rehabilitation facility now near Washington, according to this family friend.
Creed Bailey, who's this gentleman's name and who you reported on. I remember reading your piece back in October about him. I had not encountered people that I knew who had ended up with amputations, or had not sort of seen that firsthand until this. The GoFundMe page is striking. I mean, this is someone who works in the White House with a pretty serious and important job, who now appears to be facing very significant medical debt.
Right. So I wasn't able to talk to the family. His family is very private and has asked the White House to not publicize his case. But we know from what his family friend wrote on the GoFundMe page that she says he has staggering medical bills. Of course, he's a federal employee with good health insurance, but she did say that as a consequence of his amputations, that he needs various adjustments to his home. He needs a different shower modification in his bathroom. He needs handrails. He needs his car modified to accommodate a wheelchair. So she said his medical costs have just really racked up.
More broadly here, I mean, one of the things that your reporting has been so important for is just reminding everyone that the White House is a workplace. It's a workplace where a whole bunch of people work, reporters like yourself, individuals like Mr. Bailey, folks that are in the staff of the kitchen. And all those folks are being, they have to do their job. And they're often, it seems, because of White House policies, which appear to be charitably fairly lax, often it seems being exposed to a significant amount of danger of viral transmission.
Right. There have been a lot of White House officials who have been exposed to this, even though they're in one of the most secure compounds in the world. We know of at least 4 people connected to this, but we just don't know a whole lot of details about how Creed Bailey contracted the virus. I don't know the origins of that. Yeah. So it's unclear where he got it, but we do know that he worked in a secure office on the White House campus, was diagnosed in September. And remember, this was pre-election. I'm told that Creed Bailey is a very, very strong supporter of President Trump. And when he contracted this virus and was in the hospital, this was at the point of time when the president was telling the public, remember, he tweeted when he got out of Walter Reed Medical Center, don't be afraid of this virus. We have all sorts of knowledge and drugs to take care of people. And at the same time, Creed Bailey was in the hospital.
Is your sense that any corner has been turned in the White House in terms of its protocols? I saw complaints from the White House Correspondents Association just the other day that Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, sort of walked through on a tour unmasked in a very, very close and confined space. Had things improved there, protocol-wise?
Well, I know from my reporting that over the months, things did improve as cases broke out here and there, starting way back in March when one of the vice president's aides got sick, and then when another vice president, the press secretary to the vice president, got sick in May. Different protocols were put in place over those months. I do know that White House staff wear masks when we're walking around in the hallways. There's hand sanitizer, free masks. There are many people who take extreme precautions in the White House, including some of the people who did get the coronavirus are among some of the people who were the most careful about the virus.
It is Wednesday, the 16th of December of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, a lovely egg dish with an equally lovely and very velvety hollandaise sauce. And will no one rid us of these priests? That's a metaphor now, okay? Just want to let you know. Well, it's Wednesday, and Joe Biden is now the president-elect, as deemed by Vladimir Putin. Yeah. Vlad congratulated Joe and Kamala for attaining finally elected status. And since Vlad deemed it so, well, Mitch followed. And Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch McConnell to those of us who really know him, congratulated the president and vice president-elects. Which then brought, the wrath of Parler down upon him. And that wrath can be very dangerous indeed. Very. So Mitch took his cue from Vlad. And of course, who is Trump pissed off at? He's pissed off at Mitch. Not saying anything about Vlad. Of course you don't, because Trump still owes him big. Think of all the money that came directly out of the Treasury into Vlad's pockets. How'd that happen? Well, they hacked into it. And it still is not enough to pay Vlad off. What amount and what did Trump do that he owes Vlad so much that you can siphon money directly out of the U.S. Treasury and it's still not enough to pay off Trump's debt to Vlad? Well, At least Trump has his Trump and Union Nazi shock troops. Yeah, they're not going to give him. Well, on the other hand, they have been giving him quite a bit of money now, haven't they? $300 million since the election? Wow. That's a lot more than he raised before the election. So, yeah, there's some dark forces arrayed out there with some money, and they're giving it to Trump, saying, hey, overthrow America. It might be good for us. It might cause the stock market to rise. I would argue it might cause the stock market to fall, but that's just me. I think that the market doesn't like volatility. It likes, a little bit of, stability. Just a little bit. Well. That was a sad story at the top there about the White House security chief losing a toe on one foot. The big toe, by the way. And then losing, the lower portion of his other leg. And I have to say, what's even sadder is that through all of that, he's still a Trump cultist. Okay, that's how you can tell it's a cult. There are people in South Dakota that are going to their deathbeds right now, dying of COVID. It says, no, it's just a scratch. Just a scratch. A scratch killed me, not the COVID. Can't be the COVID. It's got to be a scratch. And that's what they are dying with, their last thoughts while they're dying. And their family can't visit with them. Really, So, the brainwashing works. If you're in the cult, everything is confirmation bias. And because you're confirmed. And you can make your own reality. Of course, maybe this does beggar the question that philosophers I thought had settled long ago. That is, what is reality? Well, apparently now reality is what you make it. And that is all that it is. Even though, trust me, you stand in the middle of the freeway, you're going to get hit by a car no matter what reality you've created for yourself. The universe is still there. So I guess maybe since we've created our own reality, it doesn't stop whatever giant asteroid is headed our way, and we think that it doesn't exist. Well, I guess maybe we do make our own reality now, don't we? Anyway, I actually thought that had been settled long ago. I got to tell you how chagrined I was when I mentioned Hegel, and people have no idea who I'm talking about. Even Descartes. Berkeley. They think it's Berkeley, but it's Berkeley. What is reality? And they've never even heard anything from the source. So I'm at a distinct disadvantage. Do I take the time to catch them up? I don't know. It's going to be hard. All right. Well, that's what happens when you have an anti-intellectual strain in America that has finally gotten into power and has expressed their anti-intellectual perspectives, like a Betsy DeVos. She goes to civil servants in the education department and says, do everything you can to obstruct the Biden administration. I'm counting on you. Like, she has no idea that those people serve the United States of America, not some cult figure. But that cult figure is making her a bunch of money, and that's all that matters, even though they've got more money than God. Hey, what is she rated? 14th, 18th richest person in the world? Mackenzie Bezos' ex-wife. Gave out over $4 billion in the last few months. She gave more to Puerto Rico than the United States has given since Puerto Rico had their problem, and that was like, what? Way before the Trump administration started, or right around that time when he said, hey, let me throw you some paper towels. Now clean up. Clean your jungles, and you won't have to worry about any of those jungles. Done. Well, he hated Puerto Ricans when he lived in New York, and, so what's he going to do? Anyway, she's given a lot of money, and it would be nice if our own government would do that. Maybe they will now that Joe will be taking over, except for one thing. It doesn't matter if Mitch McConnell isn't speaker. They're going to find a way to obstruct, and they will. You know, it only takes one senator to stand up and say, hey, you know, I don't think this election was right. Let's do a do-over and we'll just name the guy to run it again since he's been doing so well. I don't know who he's been doing so well for. Maybe Vlad. Maybe. It all circles back to Vlad, doesn't it? All right, while my snoozing sous chef is snoozing away, maybe I should tell you what's on the rest of the menu here, because we do have a curated show. We do. Well, on the rest of the menu, Trump picked a new acting attorney general, to take over for Barr, with an ugly record of defending racism. And it is ugly. The Supreme Court said keeping people safe from COVID threatens religious liberty, the religious liberty to infect other people at will. Well, I guess that's what volition is. And a federal judge approved a settlement between Brown University and student athletes who had challenged the school's decision to drop several women's varsity sports. Well, good. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where an independent commission found Sweden's hands-off approach to the virus failed to protect the elderly, and the government is responsible for the pandemic's debilitating effects. Well, yeah. You look at the other Scandinavian countries that didn't follow the Swedish lead, and they're able to go to restaurants now. And all I hear from the COVID deniers is, look at Sweden. Look how well Sweden's doing. Well, you know what? Sweden isn't doing very well, and now they're on lockdown. And Bermuda swore in its first black woman as governor. Finally. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. Kelly Lincoln monitors that chat room. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for everything that you do. If you would then take a gander to the leftish of the page, actually it would be to the left, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And, of course, that link is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Now, we have a Patreon page because, well, we need to pay our bills. And your generosity over all these many years has allowed us to do so. And you know who you are. And thank you to those of you who have upped your monthly contribution during these holidays. Wow, thank you so much. And to those of you who have not, when you're able, because these are times of peril, and we need to prioritize. So when you are able and can afford an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send the funds of that once a month to us, we stretch those dollars really beyond compare on the quantum level, by the way. And we pay our bills. Fly under the radar, continue resisting, because, look, there's GOP lawmakers right now calling for Trump to call out the military to keep him in office. I don't think the military will do it, but they have some others that are kind of like acting militaries. And we need to resist that. We're going to have our work cut out for us again. And your generosity and generosity in the future will help us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's so simple. Tom made it simple because you can just go to @Netroots Radio. How simple is that? Thank you, Tom, Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime and then get that out on social media. And the show notes and links diary is really an integral part of this multimedia operation. Consider it the overhead projector, putting out the bullet points that you'll need to know, and actually where the actual reportage is, independent of my, well, shall we say, clownish analysis. Look, I'm self-aware. Really, I am. Anyway, yes. I do put it out on social media. And go to the show notes and links diary. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. I love this. Where am I? Oh, yes. Why don't we dive into this first offering here at the Bistro Cafe? It's Wednesday. It's only Wednesday. Look how we are. Actually, I'm quite giddy in spite of the fact that it looks like there's, I don't know, maybe they're trying to call for a civil war. I'm just so happy that we're going to get rid of this guy anyway. All right. Now that Vlad has said that it's okay for Joe to be president, I think at least it's tempered down Mitch. Mitch only does what Vlad tells him to do anyway. Not directly. Deripaska is there to tell Mitch what to do. But that's because, well, Vlad told Deripaska to tell Mitch. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the American Independent by Donna Provencher. Donald Trump has appointed Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen to the position of Acting Attorney General, replacing Bill Barr, who resigned on Monday. Rosen's history of defending racism raises concerns about his ability to apply the concept of equal justice under the law as the Trump administration crams in as many federal executions as it can before President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration in January. Barr had publicly contradicted Trump's false claims of fraud in the 2020 presidential election, and that's why they got him out of there. Rosen has no experience as a federal prosecutor. He previously served as Deputy Secretary of Transportation as General Counsel to the White House Office of Management and Budget. Well, I guess he's experienced at being corrupt then. During his 2019 hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee for the position of Deputy Attorney General, Rosen was asked by Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut whether the Supreme Court's landmark anti-segregation ruling in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 was correct. You know, like a layup question. Softball. If you want to use the sports parlance. You know, it's just like a yes answer. How did Rosen respond? Well, let's look. Senator, I don't think that it would be productive to exercise for me to go through the most thousands of Supreme Court opinions to say which ones are right and which ones are wrong. Rosen responded. What? Jeffrey Rosen's failure to endorse the Supreme Court's unanimous decision in Brown v. Board of Education is unprecedented and unforgivable, wrote Policy Director Lisa Seiler Barrett, adding, Mr. Rosen's refusal to explicitly support the decision sends a distressing signal about what we can expect to see from the department he will help lead if confirmed, as you know, the deputy. In November of 2019, Rosen penned an op-ed published in the Washington Post that slammed Democratic prosecutors for police reform efforts. A prosecutor has a vital role to enforce the law fairly and keep the public safe. These purportedly progressive district attorneys, however, are shirking that duty in favor of unfounded decriminalization policies they claim are necessary to fix a broken system. These prosecutors risk demeaning the very institutions they are appointed to lead and fueling mistrust by promoting false narratives about the criminal justice system and law enforcement, Rosen wrote. The prosecutors are essentially flipping the script, casting criminals as victims and police as villains. This distortion is not only demoralizing to law enforcement, it also emboldens hostility toward both the rule of law and those entrusted with enforcing it. Wow, you mean like 8 years of what Trump's been doing? And in September of 2020, Rosen published an op-ed in the New York Post that was also posted on the official website of the Department of Justice. This one defending qualified immunity for police officers, arguing that it's unfair that the public can sue police officers for excessive force infractions. Police officers must be able to respond decisively and responsibly when a bad guy is threatened to slash innocents on a sidewalk with a knife. Officers don't have time to analyze legal memos. Well, you know what? I think maybe you need more than 56 hours at the police academy to be able to take a life. But that's just me. I'm a romantic. Rosen is just the latest Trump appointee to deny the existence of racial bias in the justice system. I don't agree that there's systemic racism in police departments generally in this country. Barr said in July, after Minneapolis police killed George Floyd, only 13.4% of the general population is black, yet approximately 42% of those on federal death row are. As the Trump administration carries out a string of federal executions, including 2 black men in the past week, with 2 more scheduled to be executed before Biden's inauguration, Rosen's positions on issues on race raise concerns because I think I know what is up. They want to get these last convicts, these last death row inmates, in front of a firing squad. And Bill Barr didn't like the optics of that. But Jeffrey Rosen probably does. So in that case, I guess you can kill 2 or 3 at a time now. One anonymous Justice Department prosecutor told NPR that he fears Rosen is just another Trump yes man. Well, do you think? ProVenture also brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Speaking of which, will no one rid us of these heretical Catholics from these weird cultic sects? Yes, speaking of which, on Tuesday, the Supreme Court, and that was last week, ruled in favor of religious institutions in New Jersey and Colorado that had argued that their state's pandemic-related regulations violated their religious freedom. Justice Amy Coney Barrett touted by the right as a champion of religious liberty has been a critical factor in swaying recent decisions on this subject. In the Colorado case, a small church opposed limits the state health department had placed on the number of people allowed in a building during services. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the church in a 6-3 vote, with only the court's 3 liberal justices, which are now, as we don't know, Elena Kagan, Stephen Breyer, and Sonia Sotomayor, dissenting on the grounds that the ruling was unnecessary since Colorado had already removed the restrictions. In the New Jersey case, a rabbi and a minister claimed that the state's mask mandate and a limit on service attendance to 25% of the building's capacity violated their religious liberty. The justices vacated lower court rulings that had favored the state. In both cases, the court issued injunctions allowing the houses of worship to operate at a higher capacity and with exceptions to mask wearing, comparable to those issued to restaurants and other non-retail businesses. There were no signed dissents in the New Jersey case. Now, according to NBC, New Jersey had informed the court that the case was no longer relevant since it had since lifted many of the restrictions it had issued to prevent viral spread earlier in the pandemic. Health experts continue to urge measures to control the spread. The World Health Organization's guidelines for religious services issued in April note that places of worship should defer to the recommendations of national and local authorities and suggest that virtual gatherings are safer. You know, if God is omnipresent, do you have to be confined into a building where all the germs? Probably we could say that the germs are from Satan. Even in a house of worship, Satan will try to tempt you with the virus. Do you want to get it? Stay out in the open and you'll be okay. In fact, stay away from other people. God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. Commune with God wherever you are. Well, I don't know if that can be conveyed to people because they want to rebel just for the sake of rebelling. No, I don't know. In November, after Barrett's confirmation, the Supreme Court blocked New York State's enforcement of COVID restrictions on gatherings in religious institutions. Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the court's liberal justices in dissent, and Barrett cast the deciding vote. On December 3rd, the court backed a California religious ministry that argued that Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom had imposed draconian and unconscionable prohibitions on the community. They're not in there fighting the limits on how many people can occupy a building as dictated, shall we say, by the fire marshal. Why is the fire marshal not infringing upon the religious liberty of people to pack themselves into a building to the point that they can't escape in case of a fire and then endangers the lives of the first responders coming to respond? Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge today approved a settlement between Brown University and student athletes who had challenged the Ivy League school's decision to drop several women's varsity sports. U.S. District Judge John McConnell Jr. signed off on the agreement, ending more than 2 decades of legal battles centering on gender discrimination in collegiate athletics. The settlement, originally announced in September, restores the women's equestrian and women's fencing teams to varsity status and calls for an end to a 1998 legal agreement ensuring gender equity in varsity sports at Brown on August 31st, 2024. It stemmed from a legal challenge in June to the Providence, Rhode Island school's decision to reduce several women's varsity sports teams to club status. Several men's sports were also reduced to club status, although some were later restored. While we wish we could have convinced Brown to restore all 5 teams, we were able to hammer out an agreement that has restored at least 2 and will hold the line against any more cuts for the next 4 years, Lynette Labinger, an attorney with the ACLU of Rhode Island, said. These are valuable benefits for our women athletes in the face of a growing national trend to shrink college sports programs across the country, Labinger added. The June motion by student athletes represented by attorneys with the ACLU of Rhode Island, the Public Justice, and two private law firms alleged that the cuts violated the 1998 pact known as the Cohen Agreement after that lead plaintiff in that case. The 98 agreement had stemmed from a legal challenge to Brown's decision to cut women's gymnastics and volleyball in the early 90s. Public Justice Attorney Arthur Bryant called the settlement a great victory for our clients, the female student athletes and potential student athletes at Brown, and everyone committed to advancing gender equity. Took him 2 decades. Be nice if we could get the Equal Rights Amendment ratified finally too, wouldn't it? Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Just Being Frank. Warning, this review contains structural spoilers. It's hard to summarize what writer-director Alan Ball's Uncle Frank is about because it's not clear who the main character is. The movie has a great cast, which is helmed by Sophia Lillis, Paul Bettany, and Peter McDeesey. Set mostly in the mid-'70s, Uncle Frank takes us to tiny Nowheresville, South Carolina, where we find 18-year-old Beth, played by Lillis, and her Uncle Frank, played by Bettany. Frank has left his small town and small family and teaches college in New York City, where he lives, unbeknownst to said family, with his male lover Waleed, McDeesey. The movie starts with Beth at 14, the camera floating over her shoulder as she enters her grandparents' home. Both visually and through her voiceover, Beth introduces us to her world, including her Uncle Frank, and she talks about how Frank's the only member of her family she connects with. 4 years later, when Beth goes to Frank's college and discovers both his true sexual orientation and Waleed, Frank's story very quickly asserts itself at the center of the film. It's his closeted life, his bottled demons, his boyfriend, and when a family event calls Beth and Frank home, the trip puts Frank in jeopardy, not Beth. It's his struggle we invest in, and it's him we root for, unless you're waiting for those Pence Pompeo 2024 bumper stickers. If so, don't watch this film. And at the end, after emotional catharses and climaxes which are all about Frank, Beth's narration returns. She says she's found a sense of place when we've long since forgotten that issue was at stake. This misdirection over whom we're supposed to focus on throws my emotional journey through what is otherwise a good, simple movie. Even the title, Uncle Frank, positions Beth's perspective as central when ultimately she's not. And this is Alan Ball of 6 Feet Under, True Blood, and American Beauty. Jesus Christ, he knows how to write. Why this confusion over point of view? Why not just be Frank? This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Kristen Choi was scrolling through Instagram this summer when she came across an ad.
I happened to get an Instagram ad one day for the Pfizer trial.
The Pfizer trial for the COVID-19 vaccine.
And it just occurred to me that it was really important for people to volunteer to build the science for these vaccines.
Choi is a nurse and researcher at UCLA. She filled out a form to apply, and in August, she got the first shot.
I had a long study visit with, a physical exam, a number of blood tests and other tests, a coronavirus test to make sure that I was healthy and able to participate. And then I got the injection that same day.
That first shot didn't seem that unusual, she says. A little soreness in her arm. She didn't know whether she'd gotten the real thing or just a placebo. A month later, she went in for round 2.
The second shot, though, came with a lot more symptoms than I had ever experienced with another vaccine. I developed chills, nausea, and a headache, fatigue a few hours after the vaccine. I was feeling pretty sick that day. I went to bed early and woke up in the middle of the night with a fever.
The next morning, her fever spiked to nearly 105. Her symptoms matched the side effects of the real vaccine, leading her to believe she'd gotten the real thing. Later that day, her symptoms subsided, but she became concerned that others might feel similarly sick and conclude, mistakenly, that the vaccine had given them COVID-19.
It's a common myth in America that vaccines can cause disease rather than prevent them. I do see this belief or fear come up from time to time with the flu shot. And I think what's really important for us to communicate about the COVID-19 vaccines is that the signals that we get from a vaccine, like fever, chills, nausea, muscle pain, all the things that I experienced, those are actually signs that our body is learning to fight the virus.
Choi wrote about her experience in JAMA Internal Medicine. She says healthcare providers like herself should prepare their patients for these possible side effects and explain why they occur to avoid the development of misinformation about the vaccine and its effects.
I also think it goes a long ways to be able to say to patients, as a nurse or as a healthcare provider, I've taken this vaccine myself and I think that you should too.
As for Choi, she still hasn't learned whether she got the real thing. But she says being sick for a day is a small price to pay for protection against the virus. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm dreaming of a white, non-sectarian, non-denominational, non-government-sponsored late December holiday. Hey, honey, come quick. It's the ACLU Carolers.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
'Tis the season, the silly season, the time of year when some claim that the ACLU is against Christmas because we and other groups that believe in religious freedom fight to maintain the First Amendment guarantee of a wall of separation between church and state. Separation of church and state means that religious symbols, including a creche, that's a structure depicting baby Jesus in the manger, can be displayed on private property, but that public property is reserved for all the people and not one specific religion. It is the First Amendment's Establishment Clause that prohibits the government from endorsing, favoring, supporting, or trying to establish a national religion. The other half of the guarantee of religious freedom in America is the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause guarantees the right to observe and celebrate Christmas and freely exercise religious beliefs and to sing or not sing. So may your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. That was the day that 8 women in Wilmar, Minnesota, stood up for their rights in the workplace. The women worked at the Wilmar Citizens National Bank. These women were paid considerably less than the male employees. The only female bank officer made $4,000 a year less than the men she supervised. Anger over the pay inequity came to a head when the women were told to train a new male hire. He would be their supervisor despite having less experience. He would also make more money. The women went to the bank president, Leo Persh, to discuss the unequal pay. Persh told the women, "We're not all equal, you know." He argued that men needed to be paid more because they paid for dates. For the women, this attitude was the last straw. They filed a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. They also formed a union. The Wilmar Bank Employees Association Local 1 became the first bank employees local in Minnesota. Negotiations with the bank went nowhere. The union decided to strike. Both the National Organization for Women and the United Auto Workers supported the strikers. For 2 long years, the strike wore on. The women picketed in the freezing Minnesota winters. They even lost friends over their stand. They became known as the Wilmar 8 and even saw their story turned into a made-for-TV movie by NBC. Despite the national attention, the bank refused to budge. The women ended the strike. Only one of the women went back to work for the bank, but she was demoted from her previous position and did not stay there long. And while the women did bring national attention to the issue of unequal pay, they paid a steep price for their courage. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
President-elect Joe Biden will nominate former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg to be his transportation secretary. Buttigieg, of course, ran against Biden in the 2020 Democratic presidential primaries, but ended his campaign and endorsed Biden right before Super Tuesday. If Buttigieg is confirmed by the Senate, he will become the first openly gay cabinet member. In other pre-official announcement news, Biden is also expected to nominate former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm, a strong advocate of zero-emission electric vehicles, as Secretary of Energy. And Gina McCarthy, who served as EPA administrator under Obama, she'll join the administration as Biden's domestic climate czar. I love that choice. A few sources say that Congresswoman Deb Haaland of New Mexico is the frontrunner to be named Interior Secretary. Also a great choice, though some worry that taking any more members from Congress could endanger the Democrats' majority. With many of the programs put in effect to help people survive this pandemic ending right after Christmas, it's beyond urgent now. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy met on Tuesday for over 3 hours to try to strike a new relief deal. It was the first time they'd all been together to talk about stimulus or relief since the election. And reports Wednesday morning say they're back at it already, and that individual stimulus checks have now been added to the negotiations. But state and local government aid appears to be out. Some say an agreement could come as early as Wednesday afternoon or not. President-elect Joe Biden on Tuesday was in Georgia campaigning for Democratic Senate candidates Jon Ossoff and the Reverend Raphael Warnock, who are challenging Republican incumbent senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler in those January 5th runoffs that will determine control of the Senate.
You got a couple of folks running for the United States Senate in this state who aren't confused at all. Jon Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, they're running to represent Georgia. They'll actually fight for you, represent you, stand up for you. They won't put Texas first. They won't put Donald Trump first. They won't put themselves first either. They'll put you first, the people of Georgia. There's no doubt in my mind, none, that if Texas or Trump or anyone else in the United States Senate tries to do anything except respect the will of the people of Georgia, they'll move heaven and earth to stop them.
After the November elections, Republicans now control 50 out of 100 seats. If they win either of these contests in January in Georgia, they will retain control of the Senate, with Mitch McConnell getting to continue calling the shots. If Warnock and Ossoff both win, the Democrats would then take control of the Senate, making it possible to actually accomplish something in the next 2 years. And Georgians seem to be rising to the challenge. With 3 weeks left before polls close on January 5th, a record number of them have already taken advantage of early voting, which got underway on Monday. Election officials in Richmond County, which includes Augusta, said one of the county's major voting centers recorded 2,022 in-person voters by 5 p.m. on Monday, marking a single-day record for early voting. So here we are. It's that time of the year again, when millions of people ship gifts to friends and family around the country and around the world. Add on to that a global pandemic, with one side effect being an unprecedented increase in online shopping for even basic household items, and an unscrupulous Trump-appointed Postmaster General who did his damnedest to slow things down there. And you have what we're experiencing now, an overwhelmed U.S. Postal Service. Private carriers, FedEx and UPS, who have rerouted some of their resources to deliver the new COVID vaccines around the country, have cut off pickups for some retailers, redirecting a huge amount of delivery traffic to the Postal Service, which is even worsening delays. A Postal Service transportation manager in Ohio said, "We're really gridlocked all over the place. UPS and FedEx have shut us off. Nobody can keep up right now, but we don't have the luxury of turning people down." The Postal Service warned employees this week would be the peak. And to further complicate matters and cause even more shipping delays, the biggest East Coast winter storm in years is expected to dump up to 2 feet of snow on parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast on Wednesday and Thursday. The National Weather Service warned that the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast would be hit with a widespread swath of heavy, wet snow, while western North Carolina and southwest Virginia would get freezing rain and ice. The National Weather Service saying travel is not recommended. You think? Winter storm warnings, watches, and advisories have been posted from northeastern Georgia to Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Down here in sunny South Florida, Trump's Mar-a-Lago neighbors on Tuesday sent the town of Palm Beach and the Secret Service a letter demanding that Trump not be allowed to live at his private club after he leaves office. The impeached, soon-to-be ex-president is expected to move to Mar-a-Lago after Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th. Trump shifted his official residency from New York City to Mar-a-Lago while in office. But his neighbors say in the letter obtained by the Washington Post that Trump forfeited his right to live there under an early 1990s agreement that he signed when he turned what was a residential estate into a private club. A spokesman for Trump's family business said there was no document or agreement in place preventing him from living at the club. Stay tuned. So we're learning more about a serious data breach that has affected at least 5 federal agencies, including the Departments of Homeland Security, Agriculture, and Commerce. While the investigation is ongoing, officials suspect it was carried out by a group of Russian hackers through SolarWinds, a technology company whose products are used by a number of federal civilian agencies for network management. The National Security Council and the Cyber Response Group are meeting daily to determine the scope of the hack, what data may have been exposed, and just how dangerous this all may be. But Russia's suspected involvement in the hack raises questions about previous security breaches and their efforts to infiltrate U.S. elections. Moscow has so far denied any, quote, offensive operations in the cyber domain, and Trump has been mum on the subject. Of course he has. And finally, with Donald Trump still holding out hope for a miracle on January 6th as Congress accepts the results of the election, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is urging Senate Republicans not to object to the formal certification of that vote next month. An objection would force a, quote, terrible vote on Senate Republicans by putting them in a position of having to oppose Donald Trump. It might be worth them going through the charade just for that. It'll never go through because on the House side, Nancy Pelosi will not allow it to happen. Majorities matter. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only in the mid-40s. Looks like we are having patchy fog early. Rain showers are occurring right now and will evolve into a steady rain in the afternoon. Winds will be light and variable, and rainfall looks like it's going to be about 3/4 of an inch. And then will continue tonight with about another 1/4 of an inch overnight, winds light and variable. Now we are expecting somewhere around 1/10 of an inch tomorrow with considerable cloudiness, highs in the mid-40s. We finally have an update after almost 2 weeks of no update on confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon. It now stands at 4,897, up from 4,100. And now we have 50 confirmed deceased, up from 37. My county has more deaths in that county than the rest of the state combined. Well, pollen right outside the window here at the mothership in Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 31 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.14 inches. Visibility is down to 3 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 50 degrees with rain. Paris is 49 and fair. Rome is 58 and sunny. Kyiv is 32 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 27 with its winter smoke. Hong Kong is 52 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 37 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 71 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 and partly cloudy. And New York is a chilly 30 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Sweden's government failed to sufficiently protect the elderly and care homes from COVID-19 and is ultimately responsible for the pandemic's effects in the country, according to a stinging official report released today. The Scandinavian country has stood out among European and other nations for the way it has handled the pandemic, for long not mandating lockdowns like others, but relying instead on citizens' sense of civic duty. But in an independent commission that looked into Sweden's handling of the pandemic said that Swedish elderly care has major structural shortcomings and authorities proved unprepared and ill-equipped to meet the pandemic. Nearly half the country's COVID-19 deaths have been in care homes.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est
More anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Rena Lagley has been sworn in as Bermuda's governor, marking the first time that the British territory in the Atlantic has a black woman as its leader. The event occurred yesterday, Monday, a day after Lagley arrived in Bermuda, a wealthy financial haven and popular tourist attraction. The appointment was announced in June by Queen Elizabeth II. She had previously served as director of the United Kingdom's Office of Financial Sanction Implementation. Lagley, who is also the first female to serve as Bermuda's governor, remains under quarantine as a result of her recent trip during the pandemic. Well, congratulations, and get out of quarantine when you can. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.